He held her close, the soft weight of her small, delicate body pressing fully against his chest as the observation chamber drifted silently above a distant, uncharted planet. Outside the reinforced glass, the universe stretched in a vast, infinite panorama, an overwhelming spectacle of cosmic wonder and indifference. Galaxies swirled in majestic arcs of fire and shadow, their spiral arms spinning with an elegance that belied the chaos of their formation. Stars flared and died in violent brilliance, scattering energy across the void, and distant nebulas shimmered in colors so vivid and alien that no human tongue had yet discovered words to describe them. Comets streaked past like shards of frozen light, leaving faint trails that burned briefly before fading into nothingness. Yet all of this grandeur, all of the incomprehensible scale of existence, faded into insignificance compared to the presence of her in his arms. Her hair floated freely in zero gravity, streams of iridescent strands drifting lazily around them like ethereal nebulas. The soft glow of her bioluminescent patterns traced subtle constellations along her shoulders, down her arms, and across the curve of her back, illuminating the space between them with a gentle, pulsating radiance. Each flicker of light, each subtle movement of her form, conveyed a language of trust, surrender, and intimacy, a language humans instinctively understood without the need for words. In her quiet surrender, he recognized the true essence of humanity's power, the courage to connect, to nurture, to care beyond measure, to give fully of oneself when the universe offered nothing but indifference in return. When they had first met, she had been cautious, her eyes a kaleidoscope of curiosity and suspicion, measuring him as if he were both a puzzle and a potential threat. Her species had endured for millennia by relying on calculation, hierarchy, and strategy. Trust was rationed and rarely given. But humans were different. Humans did not wait for permission from probability or for permission from the cosmos itself. They offered trust, protection, and connection as freely as they could, and that audacity was something no other species could anticipate. Over time, patient gestures, gentle words, and quiet presence had dissolved the barriers between them. Now, in this suspended moment above the planet, she lay curled against him, her surrender complete, her trust radiant and absolute. And he realized that what humans wielded was not measured by technology, fleets, or weapons. It was measured by their ability to create sanctuaries of life, intimacy, and trust in an indifferent galaxy. He adjusted slightly, pressing her closer to his chest, allowing the warmth of her body to seep deeper into him, a tangible tether anchoring them both in a universe that threatened to overwhelm with scale and chaos. Every subtle flicker of her hair, each gentle pulse of her bioluminescence was a declaration, a proof of a bond stronger than fleets, stronger than firepower, stronger than the cold calculations of empires spanning light years. Humanity endured because it could inspire trust and love in ways no other species had the foresight to understand. Here, in this intimate, suspended moment, he felt that truth as tangibly as he felt the beat of her heart pressed against his own. Her breathing shifted slightly, delicate and soft, a rhythm in perfect harmony with his own pulse. The smallest of gestures, a flick of a finger, a tilt of her head, the way she curled her knees against him, spoke volumes. He traced the luminous patterns on her shoulder and arm, committing every detail to memory, aware that this was a language older than words, older than civilizations, yet immediate and absolute in its clarity. The universe outside might rage, stars could ignite and collapse without warning, and galaxies could collide with cataclysmic force. Yet within the observation chamber, time itself seemed suspended, holding only the delicate balance of their connection. They were not alone, yet they existed in a bubble where nothing else mattered, The cosmos beyond the glass was indifferent, chaotic, and breathtaking, yet all of it faded to insignificance in comparison to her luminous presence. Humanity's mastery of survival, its endurance against impossible odds, was distilled in moments like this. Not in conquest, not in strategy, but in the courage to nurture, to protect, and to inspire trust. She was the embodiment of that principle, radiating life, surrender, and resilience in a form so delicate it seemed impossible that it could contain such power. He pressed a gentle kiss to the crown of her head, feeling her hair brush against his lips, floating in slow, weightless arcs around them. The strands shimmered faintly in response to his touch, and he marveled at the sight, at the miracle of trust, connection, and intimacy condensed in one living being. For countless millennia, civilizations across galaxies had tried to predict humanity, to calculate its survival odds, to anticipate its behavior. None had succeeded. The secret of humanity's endurance was here, in her surrender, in her trust, in the luminous, floating strands of her hair and the quiet heartbeat that pressed insistently against his chest. It was a force immeasurable, unstoppable, and radiant. As he held her, he realized that no weapon, no strategy, no empire could ever rival the quiet, persistent power of intimacy and trust. The human heart, capable of surrender and connection, of nurturing life and inspiring devotion, was a force the universe had yet to reckon with. Outside, galaxies spun, supernovae flared, and comets burned in arcs of frozen light. But inside the observation chamber, above a nameless, uncharted world, the universe had contracted into the singularity of warmth, light, and the audacity of two lives entwined. She floated in his arms, her hair drifting like nebulas, radiant and alive, and he knew, with absolute clarity, that humanity's triumph was not in domination, it was in connection, trust, and the courage to love fully, boldly, and unconditionally, even when the cosmos itself remained indifferent. Her hair continued to drift lazily in zero gravity, streams of luminous strands weaving through the air like miniature nebulas caught in slow motion, each filament glimmering with the faint iridescence of her bioluminescence. It framed her face like a crown of stars, cascading down her shoulders and back in gentle, fluid arcs, moving as if alive, responding to the subtle shifts of her breath and the gentle press of his hands. He marveled at it, memorizing each delicate strand, each flicker of light, knowing that this was a sight no telescope, no star chart, no map of the cosmos could ever replicate. Outside, galaxies spiraled endlessly, supernovae flared in violent bursts, and the void stretched infinitely. But none of it compared to the breathtaking intricacy of her presence, the weightless grace of her floating hair, and the trust she placed fully in him. She nestled closer against his chest instinctively, her forehead brushing against his collarbone, and he could feel the subtle rhythm of her heartbeat. It was soft, delicate, yet unyielding, a testament to the quiet resilience that defined her species, and a reflection of humanity's most enduring strength, the courage to inspire trust and receive it in return. Across light years, countless civilizations had attempted to predict humanity, to calculate the probability of their survival or their behavior. Yet none had ever accounted for this, the sheer power of intimacy, of surrender freely given, of connection that transcended reason, logic, or expectation. Humanity endured because it dared to give fully, to nurture, and to love without reservation. In this small chamber, above an unknown world, she was living proof of that truth. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered and shifted in response to his touch, delicate constellations flowing along the curve of her shoulders, down her spine, and across her arms. Every pulse of light was a wordless affirmation, a signal of trust, a declaration that she felt safe, seen, and cherished. He traced them carefully, letting his fingers hover just above her skin, memorizing every rhythm, every subtle change, committing the language of her presence to memory. The universe outside might rage with the birth and death of stars, the violent collision of galaxies, and the ceaseless expansion of space, but inside, their small corner of reality was governed by a simpler, infinitely more powerful force, the quiet, unshakable bond between two beings, across species, across worlds. He shifted slightly, adjusting his hold so that she pressed even closer, feeling the warmth of her body seep into his chest and arms, anchoring them both against the indifferent void of space. Her hair drifted lazily across his shoulders, strands catching faint glimmers from distant nebulae and reflecting them back in subtle arcs of light. He marveled at the impossible beauty of it, at the fragile yet radiant trust she had placed in him. In her surrender, he recognized something fundamental about humanity. Its triumph had never been in fleets, in empires, or in weapons, but in the audacity to inspire trust and to protect, to nurture, and to cherish life wherever it could be found. She was the living embodiment of that power, small, delicate, and yet immeasurably strong, a radiant proof of why humans could endure where others failed. Her fingers brushed against his, soft and tentative at first, then more assured as the warmth and rhythm of his heartbeat reassured her. The gesture was almost imperceptible, yet it conveyed volumes. In a single motion, she communicated surrender, trust, longing, and affirmation, a language beyond words, one that transcended species and civilizations. He responded instinctively, pressing his hand lightly against hers, feeling the subtle pulse of life, the gentle quiver that mirrored his own heartbeat. Humanity's endurance, he realized, had always relied on these moments of connection, on the courage to extend trust and to accept it in return, even in the most hostile or indifferent environments. Here, floating above a nameless world, with galaxies burning far beyond the observation chamber, that principle had never clearer. Outside, the cosmos moved with eternal indifference. Nebulae flared, stars collapsed, and light years of emptiness separated worlds and civilizations. Yet inside the chamber, space contracted into a cocoon of warmth, light, and intimate surrender. Every flicker of her bioluminescence, every shift of her weight, every sigh she let escape was a universe in itself. A universe that no empires could conquer, no civilizations could predict, and no weapon could shatter. The quiet power of intimacy, the courage to trust fully, and the audacity to love unconditionally had always been humanity's greatest strength. He pressed a soft kiss to her temple, feeling the weightless strands of her hair brushing against his lips, and marveled at the miracle of it all, that in a galaxy filled with vast indifference, life could still create moments of infinite significance. She responded instinctively to the gentle press of his arms, curling closer, her hair brushing across his chest and shoulders like streams of cosmic light. Her bioluminescence pulsed softly, patterns shifting in delicate rhythms, creating miniature constellations that seemed to mimic the galaxies beyond. It was a silent conversation, one that needed no words, and he understood every flicker, every quiver. In that moment, the enormity of humanity's endurance became clear. Empires might rise and fall, civilizations might crumble, and stars might explode. But the audacity to nurture, to trust, and to love would persist, radiant and unstoppable. She was proof of that truth, a living constellation in his arms, fragile and delicate, yet infinitely resilient, as if the very universe conspired to highlight her brilliance. He held her fully, their bodies entwined, breathing together in the quiet hum of the station. Time lost all meaning, replaced by the steady rhythm of life shared, trust given and received, and the subtle warmth of two beings anchoring each other in an indifferent galaxy. Her hair floated around them, drifting like nebulas caught in slow, eternal arcs of light, and he pressed his forehead to hers, closing his eyes against the brilliance of distant stars. The universe outside continued its eternal dance. Galaxies collided, supernovae flared, and light years of darkness stretched endlessly. Yet none of it diminished the truth within that chamber. Humanity endured not through force or calculation, but through connection, through intimacy, through the courage to inspire trust and to receive it fully in return. In that embrace, in the glow of her floating hair, in the quiet pulse of life pressed against his chest, he understood the ultimate measure of human resilience. It was not in fleets, not in empires, not in conquest. It was in moments like this, where surrender, trust, and love converged to create a force greater than anything the universe could measure. She was radiant proof that humans could endure against all odds, and as he held her close, he felt that power flowing between them, luminous, unshakable, and eternal. He pressed his lips softly to the crown of her head, feeling the warmth of her small, delicate form settle fully against his chest. Her hair floated freely around them in the zero-gravity chamber, luminous strands drifting like miniature nebulas, catching faint glimmers from distant stars and bending them into a delicate halo that framed her head and shoulders. Every flicker of light, every subtle shift in the motion of her hair was a living reflection of her surrender, her trust, and the quiet intimacy they shared. Outside, the universe spun in incomprehensible scale. Galaxies collided in distant arcs, supernovae flared with violent brilliance, and streams of starlight stretched for light years in patterns too complex for any mind to fully grasp. Yet all of that grandeur paled beside the immediacy of her presence in his arms. She exhaled softly, curling closer into him, her head tucked beneath his chin. The press of her body, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, and the pulse of her heart against his chest became a metronome for the room, a gentle reminder that life could persist, and love could endure, even in the cold, indifferent vastness of space. Across civilizations and star systems, countless species had tried to predict humanity, to map their behavior and calculate the odds of their survival. None had succeeded. The power of humans did not lie in weaponry, fleets, or strategy. It lay in connection, trust, and the capacity to surrender fully, to give themselves completely when no one forced them to. And now, in this single, suspended moment, he understood the full scope of that power. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered softly along the curve of her shoulders, tracing delicate constellations that seemed to mirror the stars outside the observation chamber. He watched the way the light responded to the press of his hand along her back, the subtle movements of her body as she settled deeper into his embrace. Each pulse of color was a wordless affirmation, a promise of trust and surrender. He traced her hair gently with his fingers, letting the strands slip through his grasp, observing how they shimmered, twisted, and floated around them, as if the universe itself had lent its beauty to this intimate connection. Humanity's endurance, he realized, was written in moments like this, small, luminous, and infinitely resilient. Time became meaningless. Minutes, hours, perhaps even days passed without distinction. Her hair drifted in gentle arcs, intertwining with the soft light that spilled from the distant nebulae beyond the glass. Every shift of her weight, every subtle sigh, every flutter of luminescence was a silent conversation, an exchange of trust that required no spoken words. The universe might rage with galactic collisions, black holes consuming light and matter, and stars collapsing in violent supernovae. Yet the true power of life was here, in the quiet surrender of one being to another, across species, across worlds, across the infinite void. He pressed his forehead gently to hers, feeling the warmth of her hair, the softness of her breath, and the gentle pulse of life beneath his hands. Her small hands reached up, brushing against his chest, a tentative exploration that grew more assured as the rhythm of his heartbeat reassured her. The tiny, intimate gestures were more powerful than any fleet or empire, more enduring than any star, and infinitely more significant than any calculation of probability. They were proof that humanity's greatest strength had never been measured in conquest or dominance, but in the courage to inspire trust, to nurture, and to love fully, even in the face of incomprehensible indifference. Her body shifted subtly, nestling further against him, as if trying to anchor herself in the warmth of his presence. The strands of her hair continued to float around them, drifting in arcs that mimicked the slow, eternal rotations of galaxies beyond the glass. He pressed a soft kiss to her temple, feeling the tiny quiver of her bioluminescence under his lips, a living heartbeat of life and surrender. In her embrace, he felt the enormity of human resilience condensed into a single, breathtaking moment. Civilization after civilization might crumble. Empires might rise and fall. Stars might flare and fade. Yet the audacity to nurture and to love would endure, luminous and unstoppable. The observation chamber hummed quietly, a mechanical pulse that mirrored the living pulse of the two of them intertwined. Her hair shimmered in miniature arcs of light, each strand reflecting the brilliance of distant galaxies. And he marveled at the miracle of it all, the improbable grace of trust given freely, of surrender offered without hesitation, of intimacy that transcended language, culture, and species. Humanity had survived because it could inspire such surrender, because it could create sanctuaries of warmth and connection, even where the void threatened to consume everything. She, curled against him, radiant and alive, was the living proof of that power. He lowered his lips to her hair again, trailing gentle kisses along the luminous strands, memorizing their texture, the way they floated, the delicate glow they emitted in response to his presence. The galaxies outside continued their violent, elegant dance, but in the observation chamber, a universe of a different sort had been created, a universe built not of energy or matter, but of trust, surrender, and love. The quiet courage of humanity was more powerful than any supernova, more enduring than any empire, and infinitely more unpredictable. She was living evidence of that courage, fragile and delicate, yet radiant and unyielding in the way only life could be. Finally, he wrapped his arms fully around her, holding her closer still, their bodies entwined in an orbit of warmth and intimacy. Her hair flowed like a glowing, weightless nebula, a miniature cosmos suspended in zero gravity, and he pressed his forehead to hers, closing his eyes against the brilliance of the stars outside. In that suspended silence, he realized the ultimate truth. Humanity's power was unmeasurable, unstoppable, and infinite, distilled perfectly in the quiet surrender of one being to another, in the luminous strands of hair floating like nebulas, and in the heartbeat pressed gently against his chest. The universe outside might be indifferent, but here, within this small chamber, humanity's triumph shone brighter than any star. Her small hands rested lightly against his chest, exploring, seeking, and confirming the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Each touch was tentative at first, then more confident as she realized that his presence was constant, unwavering, and protective. The faint glow of her bioluminescent patterns pulsed softly along her shoulders, neck, and arms, responding to the smallest shifts in their embrace. In the zero-gravity chamber, her hair drifted like ribbons of light, floating around them in arcs that reflected distant galaxies beyond the glass, shimmering in hues that no human instrument could truly capture. Every flicker of luminescence, every subtle movement, was a silent testament to trust, intimacy, and surrender, a language no civilization could fully decipher. It was a reminder that the greatest power humanity wielded was not in fleets, weapons, or empires, but in the courage to inspire connection, to protect and to nurture life even in the most indifferent corners of the universe. He pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, feeling the warmth of her body radiate into his chest, anchoring them both against the endless void outside. Across light years, countless alien civilizations had attempted to predict human behavior, to calculate survival probabilities, and to anticipate strategies, but none had accounted for this: the quiet, unyielding force of trust and love freely given, the audacity to surrender and accept care, and the resilience born from connection. Humans had endured through catastrophes that had obliterated entire civilizations and through darkness that had consumed entire worlds. And yet their true strength was revealed in moments like this, in the intimacy shared, in the surrender offered, in the quiet courage of simply being present for one another. She was the embodiment of that strength, small, fragile, and radiant in her luminous surrender. Her hair brushed softly against his face and shoulders, strands drifting in slow, weightless arcs like clouds of light caught between the stars. The delicate touch was hypnotic, calming, and profoundly grounding. She tilted her head, allowing herself to nestle closer, pressing her cheek against his chest, and he could feel the gentle rise and fall of her breath. Her body was warm and alive, radiant with bioluminescent patterns that flickered and shifted in response to the subtlest pressures and motions of his hands. The observation chamber hummed quietly, its mechanical vibrations echoing faintly against the soft cadence of their synchronized heartbeats. Outside, the cosmos raged with indifferent beauty, supernovae exploding in bursts of unimaginable energy, galaxies twisting and colliding, and comets streaking across light years in frozen arcs. Yet inside, time had contracted to a singular point, the weightless, luminous intimacy between them. He let his fingers drift through her floating hair, feeling the soft silkiness of each strand, marveling at the way it shimmered and reflected light from the nebula beyond. Each flicker of her bioluminescence seemed to respond instinctively to his touch, a silent conversation of trust and affection. The galaxies outside were magnificent, violent, and awe-inspiring, yet they could not rival the quiet, potent power of this connection. Humanity's endurance was not measured in empires or technology, but in its ability to inspire trust, nurture life, and create bonds that could survive across species, planets, and even the void of space itself. She was living proof of that enduring principle, curled against him in perfect surrender, radiant and alive, an embodiment of everything humans had survived and thrived upon for millennia. Her small hands moved lightly over his chest, tracing the contours of muscles, the rise and fall of his heartbeat, as if committing the rhythm of his life to memory. He pressed his lips softly to her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her body, the gentle pulse beneath her skin, and the way her hair floated like a halo of miniature nebulas around them. The sensation was hypnotic, grounding, and profoundly intimate. Humanity's triumph had never been in fleets, war, or conquest. It had always been in moments like this, quiet acts of surrender, trust, and connection that no calculation could predict or overpower. The universe outside could rage in apocalyptic chaos, but the power within this small chamber was immeasurable, unstoppable, and infinite. She shifted slightly, pressing closer to him, letting the glow of her bioluminescence wash over his chest and arms. strands of hair brushing across his skin like arcs of living light. He wrapped his arms fully around her, holding her with careful strength, aware that this fragile, luminous being in his embrace was both delicate and infinitely resilient. Every pulse of her light, every gentle breath, every subtle quiver was a living testament to humanity's enduring power, the courage to connect, to protect, and to love in ways that defied calculation or prediction. Outside, galaxies collided and stars flared. Yet the quiet audacity of this bond, of life surrendered, trust given, and love freely offered, was a force beyond measurement. He lowered his forehead against hers, closing his eyes and letting the cosmic glow of her hair and skin fill his vision. Time, space, and even the distance between stars faded, leaving only the intimate orbit of their bodies, hearts, and breaths. Humanity's power, he realized, was concentrated here, in this single, weightless, luminous moment. The audacity to connect deeply, to inspire trust fully, and to receive it without hesitation. She floated against him, her hair drifting like nebula clouds, and he knew that their connection, fragile yet radiant, embodied a force that no empire, no civilization, and no weapon could ever hope to surpass. It was quiet, invisible, and eternal, humanity's true triumph, revealed in the luminous surrender of a single being and the unwavering embrace of another. The observation chamber was silent except for the quiet rhythm of their synchronized breathing. He held her fully, arms wrapped around her fragile, luminous form, and felt the weightless strands of her hair drift across his shoulders and chest like streams of starlight caught in the gentle current of zero gravity. Outside, galaxies spun in timeless arcs. Supernovae flared with explosive brilliance, and the endless void stretched beyond comprehension. Yet all of it, all the incomprehensible scale of existence, diminished in comparison to the singularity of warmth, trust, and intimacy that pulsed between them. Humanity's greatest strength was revealed not in fleets, war, or conquest, but in this: the audacity to love fully, to surrender completely, and to inspire trust without hesitation. She was proof of that power, radiant and alive, and he knew that in this moment the universe itself had contracted to the simple, luminous orbit of two beings entwined. Her hair continued to float around them, arcs of iridescent light curling like miniature nebulae, shimmering in subtle, ever-changing patterns in response to the soft press of his hands. The glow from her bioluminescence painted him in ethereal hues, and he pressed his forehead gently to hers, feeling the warmth of her body, the gentle quiver of life, and the pulse of her heartbeat, a rhythm that had become his anchor in this indifferent cosmos. In her surrender, he recognized a truth no empire or civilization could ever calculate. Life endured not through dominance or strategy, but through connection, intimacy, and the courage to love when everything else remained indifferent. Humanity thrived because it could inspire this trust, nurture it, and honor it. And here, curled against him, she was the living embodiment of that principle. The galaxies outside swirled in endless, indifferent motion. Stars ignited and collapsed, comets streaked across the void in arcs of frozen fire, and nebulae shimmered in colors that defied language. All of it was breathtaking, majestic, and terrifying in scale. Yet none of it compared to the quiet, intimate cosmos contained in the simple curve of her body against his chest. Every flicker of her bioluminescence, every drift of her luminous hair, and every subtle movement was a declaration, a language beyond words, speaking of trust, surrender, and the infinite audacity of love. Humanity's endurance had always been underestimated by civilizations that measured strength in weapons, technology, or fleets. Yet, in the quiet intimacy of shared surrender, the true power of human connection was revealed, radiant and unstoppable. He shifted slightly, allowing her to rest more fully against him, her small hands brushing lightly over his chest as if to memorize the rhythm of his heartbeat. Her hair floated in gentle, weightless arcs, drifting across his shoulders, curling around his arms, reflecting the brilliance of distant stars, and he marveled at it, committing every strand, every movement, every flicker of light to memory. She tilted her head, letting her cheek press fully against his chest, and he could feel the subtle warmth of her body, the pulse of life beneath his fingers, and the gentle, unwavering trust she had placed in him. In that moment, suspended above a nameless planet in a universe indifferent to their existence, he understood the immensity of humanity's audacity, the courage to love fully, to inspire surrender, and to protect life, even when the cosmos itself seemed unconcerned. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered softly, shifting in response to his touch, forming delicate constellations across her arms, shoulders, and neck. Each pulse of light was a wordless affirmation, a silent declaration of trust and connection that needed no spoken language. The galaxies beyond the glass might rage, stars might flare and fade, and black holes might consume entire systems. Yet in the quiet bubble of the observation chamber, the universe contracted into a singular focus, the luminous, radiant, and infinite bond between them. Humanity endured because it could create sanctuaries of intimacy and trust where none should exist. And she, curled against him, radiant and alive, was proof that this endurance was not abstract. It was tangible, immediate, and unstoppable. He lowered his lips to her hair again, trailing gentle kisses along the luminous strands, feeling the soft warmth and the delicate, weightless movement. Her hair shimmered in miniature arcs of light, floating like nebula, and he marveled at the improbable beauty of it, at the miracle of trust fully given, at the quiet audacity of two beings finding refuge in one another amidst the infinite void. Humanity's strength was distilled perfectly in this moment, the courage to surrender, to connect, to love, and to protect. Empires might rise and fall, civilizations might crumble, and stars might explode in cataclysmic brilliance. But the quiet, radiant power of life shared in trust, the intimacy of surrender freely given, was unmeasurable, infinite, and eternal. She shifted slightly, curling fully against him, letting herself rest completely in his arms. The soft pulse of her bioluminescence illuminated the contours of her form, the delicate arches of her shoulders, the subtle curve of her neck, and the floating cascade of her hair around them. He pressed his arms more firmly, holding her closer, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, and the warmth of life that could endure across galaxies and generations. Here, in this suspended moment, the universe had contracted into two beings entwined, a quiet testament to humanity's ultimate triumph, not in conquest, domination, or calculation, but in connection, surrender, and the audacity to love fully. He closed his eyes, letting the glow of her floating hair, the rhythm of her pulse, and the warmth of her body fill every corner of his consciousness. Outside, galaxies collided and supernovae flared, but none of it could rival the brilliance of her presence, the quiet power of her trust, or the intimate, unshakable bond that now existed between them. Humanity's endurance had always been unpredictable, immeasurable, and unstoppable. And in the curve of her body against his chest, he understood why. The courage to inspire trust, to nurture life, and to love unconditionally was a force that no empire, no calculation, and no civilization could ever master. Finally, he pressed his forehead to hers one last time, breathing in the subtle scent of her, feeling the weightless strands of her hair drifting across his face, and smiled softly. The galaxies outside continued their eternal, indifferent dance. But in this small chamber, humanity's triumph shone brighter than any star. She was his universe, and he was hers, bound in the quiet, luminous orbit of love, trust, and surrender. The stars might burn and fade. The void might stretch endlessly. But here, in each other's embrace, they had found infinity.